Dear students, welcome to EPG. I am Tanya Thomas from Srimati VHT Central Institute of Home Science, Bangalore. Today we will be doing counseling process. Counseling is defined as both a self-confirming experience and a validating experience that help establish productive methods of self-defining behaviors for each individual person. Counseling is a systematic process in which the counselor and the client collaboratively view the problem, set goals, formulate action plans, and evaluate advancement towards the goals. It is a helping process in which the counselor helps the client to achieve goals with the minimal assistance given by the counselor. The structure of counseling process has different variations: 3-step process, 5-step process, and 6-step process. Counseling can be hypothesized as a series of steps which lead to counseling process from one step to another. According to Comia and Hackney in 1987, the counseling process can be theorized as a 5-stage process, but nowadays these stages have been detailed to 6-stage process, and they are: Stage 1, relationship building; Stage 2, assessment and diagnosis; Stage 3, formulation of counseling goals; Stage 4, intervention and problem solving; Stage 5, termination and follow-up; Stage 6, research and evaluation. A counseling process would include these 6 stages. The counselor would select the stages according to the process in the counseling process. For example, the counselor may combine the first 2 stages, that is, the relationship building and assessment and diagnosis, in the first meeting and would formulate goals for the client in the second meeting. This shift would happen according to the client and the rapport built with the client. First stage, relationship building. This stage is called the rapport building stage, and it is the heart of the counseling process. Lies in this stage. According to Weiner and Lennox in 1994, the relationship building is establishing a therapeutic relationship between the counselor and the client, also developing a sort of rapport between the two. The successful outcome depends on the relationship built by the counselor with the client. The first interview is vital, as a client is judging the counselor on various criteria such as: is the counselor genuine? Will the counselor be able to empathize with the client? Will the counselor be judgmental about the issues? Counseling is essential and is vital to recognize the degree of importance. Researchers have recognized the counseling process as 2 categories. One is counselor offered conditions, and the second one is counselor and client offered condition. First one, the counselor offered condition is a counseling process in which counselor influences or plays a role in the counseling process. The counselor offered condition focuses on the core conditions which are required for effective counseling and social influence model. What are the core conditions? Although it appears that general agreement is required in the first stage of the counseling, there are few core conditions which should be set forth to make the counseling process a successful one. According to Rogers, 1957, the core conditions required for counseling to be successful are empathetic understanding, unconditional positive regard, and congruence. Later, Karlhoff extended the list of core conditions and eventually arrived at a list of 8 factors which were divided into 2 categories, namely responsive dimensions and initiative dimensions. Responsive dimensions are empathy, listening skills. Initiative dimensions are genuineness, self-disclosure, confrontation, immediacy, and correctness. The 8 core conditions are vital and required for behavioral changes to arise in an individual. Each of the core conditions are described in detail. First one, empathy. The utmost vital core condition essential for counseling process to happen. According to Rogers, the definition of empathy is an accurate empathetic understanding of the client's world as seen from inside. To sense the client's private world by placing oneself in the client's world and sensing it as if it were their own world. Empathy is a method by which the counselor enters and experiences the client's phenomenological world. It is an active process where the counselor becomes aware of the feelings, thoughts, experiences, and underlying motives of the client. In other words, the counselor is mirroring the thought process of the client which he or she is undergoing. Empathetic understanding is a multi-stage process consisting of different levels of empathy. Gladstone identified the following stages of empathy. The counselor has emotional reaction to the client situation. The counselor attempts to understand the client situation from client's perspective. The counselor communicates empathy to the client, and the client feels a sense of caring and understanding from the counselor. According to Egan 2002, empathy has been identified as primary empathy and advanced empathy. Primary empathy involves the counselor's skill of attending, listening and communicating the accurate information. Advanced empathy involves a characteristic of primary empathy in addition to various skills such as directiveness, interpretation, perception, discovery of thoughts, etc. Second one is unconditional positive regard. It is the basic acceptance and support of the person regardless of who he or she is, what he or she has committed and what he or she says. It is the most valuable core condition in the relationship building stage because the counselor communicates to the client that he or she is of value and are worthy individuals. This concept can be referred to as reward, respect, warmth, prizing, etc. Unconditional positive regard requires counselors to suspend any form of personal judgment and accept clients regardless of the content they disclose. Congruence. Behaving in a manner in the way one feels and thinks. Congruence is one known as genuineness. Congruence is being oneself in the counseling process with the client without pertinence or facade. Being congruent does not mean being frank or blurting out the feelings that the counselor has in mind. It also means deciding on when to share a thought or feeling with others. The author in 1993 pointed that congruence can be divided into two separate components: the ability to be aware of one's own internal experiences, transparency, the willingness to communicate to the other person what is going on within. Fourth one is immediacy. Immediacy is an ability of the counselor to use the immediate situation to invite the client to look at what is going on between their relationship. This concept was developed by Krakow. Immediacy allows the counselor to directly address the pattern of relationship, to explore trust issues, to explore boundaries, to address the issues of differences. Counselor addresses these issues by talking to the client. For example, if the counselor has noticed certain trust issues, you told me at the start that you find it difficult to trust others. Now I notice you are hesitating about telling me more about your situation. I wonder whether you're feeling uncertain about trusting me. Confrontation. Confrontation is a direct method in which the counselor helps the client to face themselves realistically. Garner in 1959 defines confrontation as a direct, authoritative statement instructing the clients to control specific drives or to modify certain behaviors. The confrontation statement is always followed by a question: what do you think or feel about what I said? This confrontation method is intended to help clients explore their willingness to comply with the analyst's advice and to evaluate client controls. Confrontation is a difficult and risky core condition used in the counseling process because a client might misread the confrontation and he or she may feel attacked or rejected by the counselor. According to Egan 2002. Concreteness. The meaning of concreteness is to be specific and definite. In counseling, concreteness is used to help clients discuss their concerns in specific terms. Clients may feel overwhelmed by their problems and have difficulty in putting things into perspective. While this occurs, concreteness can help clients stay focused on one issue. Concreteness serves three important functions. It keeps the therapist's response close to the client's feeling and experiences. It fosters accurateness of understanding in the therapist, allowing for early client correction of misunderstanding. It encourages the client to attend to the specific problems. Self-disclosure: the counselor discloses information to the client of himself or herself in an informative manner. The information disclosed is brief and appropriate for the client. When the information is shared with the client-counselor relationship strengthens. Self-disclosure can be made voluntarily or can be made when the client requests for the same. Self-disclosure can help the client be open to the counselor about his or her problems. The second kind of counseling method is counselor and client offered condition. In this counseling technique, the working alliance is described as another concept. This counseling techniques go beyond and focuses on both counselor offered condition and client offered condition. The working coalition is of three parts. They are agreement between the counselor and the client in terms of goals of counseling, agreement between the counselor and the client in terms of task of counseling, emotional bond between the counselor and the client. The strength of working alliance depends on the degree of agreement relating to goals and task of counseling and the level of emotional attachment between the counselor and the client. Social influence model. Don, following Strong, outlined a model of counseling based on the finding from social psychology. According to these thinkers, the three main dimensions of counseling influence are perceived, expertness, trustworthiness, and attractiveness. This model was based on an empirical research and points that clients are frequently influenced and impressed by the positivity, credibility, for example, diplomas, professional language, formal style, and expertness of the counselor. This counseling model has two stages and emphasizes on the counseling offered conditions in the counseling process. In the beginning stage, the counselor tries to be interpreted by the client. The client perceives counselor as trustworthy, expert, and attractive. Counselor establishes a power base during this stage. This counseling process has only two stages. So, in the second stage, the power base which is established by the counselor is used to exert positive influence on the client. Three main dimensions of the counselor. Counselors tended to be perceived as an expert when they had objective evidence of training and utilized prestigious cues such as consistent and responsive non-verbal behavior such as touch, smiling, and body leans, and use narrative analogies and empathetic responses. Counselors were perceived as attractive when they had objective evidence of training and were self-disclosing. Counselors appeared more trustworthy when they used credible introductions and reputational cues, responsive non-verbal behavior, and verbal and non-verbal cues associated with confidentiality. Once counselors establish a power base by appearing expert, attractive, and trustworthy, they can exert a positive influence on the client. Stage 2. Assessment and diagnosis. Assessment and diagnosis in the counseling process begins in the second stage. In this stage, the counselor develops an in-depth understanding of the client's problem and identifies the mental disorder that requires attention. It contributes to the important aspects of counseling process. This stage helps the counselor in setting the goals and interventions required by the client. Assessment is a process of documentation. Assessment involves a collection of data and information in order to identify, examine, estimate, and address the counseling process. Assessments are used across all counseling settings in variety of ways. Assessment procedures can be divided into two: standardized and non-standardized measures. Standardized measures are highly structured and designed so that each time a procedure is used, the process is exactly the same. Non-standardized measures can be specific only to a given client or set of circumstances with minimal chance of replication. Diagnosis literally means identification of the nature and basis of particular occurrence. Diagnosis is a medical term which means determining the nature of problem. It is a result statement. According to Rosenhan and Salman, 1995, diagnosis in counseling can be used for four reasons mainly: facilitating communications, shorthand, indicating possible treatment strategies, communicating the cause of condition, aiding in scientific investigation. Stage 3 is formulation of counseling goals. Formulation of goals help the counselor and the client to stay focused. According to Comier and Hackney, 1993, counseling goals serves three functions in the process: motivational, educational, and evaluative. Counseling goals are motivational because clients work in establishing goals and it helps the clients to work harder to achieve the goals. Clients may also be motivated to achieve the goals as it would be specific, concrete, and client can invest their energy on addressing these specific issues. The duty of the counselor is to motivate the client to accomplish the goals by verbal comments. Second function of counseling goal is educational. According to Comier and Hackney, clients can learn new skills and attitudes. Clients can change their attitudes, learning styles, and behavior, and they incorporate new skills so that their functioning enhances. For instance, one of the counseling goals for the client is to be assertive. So the client in this process is learning to be assertive. This will help the client to enhance their functioning, and it will enhance their interpersonal skills and would make them a better person. The third function of counseling goal is evaluative. This is most important function of the process because this is a stage where client and the counselor evaluates the goals set by them. Counseling goals also can be conceptualized as a process goal and outcome goal. Process goals. These goals are established to make counseling process work successfully. Process goals relate to formulating positive relationship by promoting the core conditions. The process goals are concerned with counselor and it's primary responsibility of counselor to accomplish it. Outcome goals. This is concerned with client and the client hopes to accomplish the goal. The client and the counselor should agree on the goals and necessary modifications should be made. Stage 4 is intervention and problem solving. The counselor and the client, after formulating the counseling goals, they should determine what intervention strategies to implement. They may choose variety of intervention strategies including for counseling, including individual counseling, group counseling, family counseling, couple counseling. For couple counseling, the intervention that can be used would include conflict management, improving interpersonal skills, etc. Involving clients in the process of selecting intervention strategies has some advantages. This would help the client and the counselor together select a strategy that seems realistic in terms of its strengths and weaknesses instead of working out with the strategy without apparent success. Counselor should provide an overview of different strategies and intervention that can be used by the client to face his or her issues. With the information, the counselor should also provide information on the role of the client in accomplishing the task. The counselor should also brief the client on time and cost that can be involved. It is also important for the counselor to be sensitive to the client's behaviors and the characteristics. The client's feebleness, assets, beliefs and values should be considered while selecting the intervention strategy. Problem solving strategies. Problem solving is a way conceptualizes intervention. It involves individual, group, marriage or family counseling. Counselors should develop a systematic approach to problem solving in order to help a client to resolve problems. This approach would enable clients to learn skills that could contribute to their personal autonomy. Stage 5. Termination and follow-up. This is the end of counseling relationship. Termination happens when the client has understood their problem, issues and concerns and has gained confidence to move forward. In this stage, the client will be able to move forward without any assistance from the counselor. Termination will include countless emotions because the client and the counselor who are involved in the relationship would terminate the relationship. Stage 6. Research and evaluation. Research and evaluation is an integral part of counseling process and can happen at any time during the counseling process. Counselors can evaluate the new strategies by researching and evaluating on the same. Counselors can use research and evaluation to communicate accountability to the client. This procedure involves face-to-face interaction between the client and the counselor. Research and evaluation can be used before termination of the counseling process. To conclude this particular session, counseling is a process of understanding one's problem and helping them to cope with the problem using counseling methods. Traditionally, counseling was done by elders in the family and solving of a problem was a family affair. But now, because of changing society and lifestyle, counseling services are given by an external agency. Counseling would help individuals to understand themselves, their potentials and strengths, and strengthen their weaknesses.